this guy is incarcerated and he's doing his time. So the training summary today, basically what is sexual abuse? Sexual abuse is any act between an adult or a minor or two minors where it's just power being exerted. Someone saying, hey, I'm more powerful than you and I'm going to make you do this act and pretty much take advantage of you. So it's the forcing or the coercion, so the basic manipulation of that individual to get them to do something. So it doesn't necessarily even have to be penetration, but really coercing that child to do something or do something with somebody else for your own enjoyment, for your own entertainment. So pornography, showing them pornography, or having them, exhibitionism, like when they're masturbating with themselves, on themselves or someone else. Again, for that adult or that other child's own entertainment. So youth who have been sexually abused are affected in so many different ways. I mean, in so many different ways. And, it shuts them down. It manifests itself through mental illness. So we see children and some adults who are obese. I mean, that is a manifestation that's depression that's masked. Okay, if we see someone who's using different substances like alcohol and drugs, that is depression that's masked. So just different ways. It's always a core in terms of how it's always a root to those behaviors and why somebody got that way. So it affects them emotionally, socially. I mean, it affects the work performance as well. If it's an adult or teenager, child. Some of the objectives of this evening's training is we're going to discuss the principles and the concepts and the different definitions and just boundary setting within itself. So the behaviors of youth who are sexually abused, we're going to talk about some of those indicators, just some real signals to look out for, because some of us, we may look at our children's files, and if we have enough time to go through these files that are like this thick, depending on how long the child was in care, they may have sexual abuse in there. Maybe they're a predator, maybe they're a victim. But even if they're not, I really want to go over some of the signs for us to look out for, so that we know what it is. Because with children, especially children in care, it takes them a really long time to establish trust between a foster parent or a professional or just anybody that hasn't been in their life for a long time. With a lot of them, they want to test you. They want to test the behaviors. They want to test how far can they take you to see if you care, if you give a damn about them or not. Right? Because for many of our children, we are not the first foster parents to have them within our house. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Some of them have been to 20, 30, 40, 50 foster care homes, to residential treatment facilities, RTCs, and the list goes on, different family members and so forth. So it's just definitely a lot of different indicators in terms of the behaviors that they show that can signal to you that something's going on, especially children who hoard food. You give them 3 meals a day, but they still are taking food and hiding it under the bed. That's an indicator right there that they're having some issues with eating on a regular basis. And food is something that's important to them. Sleeping with the light on, right? That's an indicator that somebody, when the light was off when you were sleeping, that somebody with some power probably came in that room and wanted to molest that child. Okay, so just different things that we have to just keep an eye out on and communicate with the children about it. Have that relationship to, where it's open and communicate with them about the different behaviors that we see. And I know as parents, and I'm a stepfather of a 21-year-old, so it's hard because it's not my biological child. And when I met him, he was just turned 12 years old. It's hard to have some of those sensitive conversations because he didn't grow up under me, and he's not as open with me as he is with his mother. So, certain things are going to be easier for him to talk about with his mom than it would be with me. But I found that in my history as his stepdad, the only time that I would take the initiative to talk with him about things is when we had an argument, right? We have an argument, and then I talk to him about that, and then that's just like it's Pandora's box. It sort of opens it up for me to talk about anything else. But, as I get older and wiser, and so he's getting older as well, and what I like to encourage to you guys is to, talk to the children that are in your home before anything happens, right? And spending that one-on-one time. If you have a biological child, that can be difficult because you have this biological child of your own, and then you also have the foster care child. So they're like pulling you from both sides to try to see who loves him or her the most. And that could be very difficult for you because you want to give them the same amount of love, but then sometimes the foster child can be, seeking more love from you and testing you more and testing your patience. And it can be overwhelming for you to affect you physically, emotionally, and spiritually on all ends. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the facts and the myths associated with sexual abuse and just some briefly on some sex abuse stats as well. So with sexual abuse, it's a huge component of trauma, right? Trauma is a huge part of the sexual abuse. That's a whole part of it. It's a traumatic incident. It's something that, a lot of people don't recover from. They don't recover from that, and it has an effect on them. They want to suppress those feelings and don't want to talk to anybody about how they feel or anything about their victimization because it brings it up again. And that puts them right in the situation again. So what is trauma? Trauma is a single event or series of events over time that can tax or overwhelm a person's resources and basically a sense of well-being. So a child or adult who experiences any type of sexual abuse has experienced trauma. And they're also going to have some form of post-traumatic stress disorder. So with that, if you know anything about post-traumatic stress disorder, you're going to know that certain scents, colognes, perfumes, different smells are going to signal that stress, that traumatic type of incident that you have endured. Okay, sexually abused children. Now I want to go through just a couple of statements now that I'm going to ask for a little crowd participation, and I want you guys to tell me if you feel that the statement that I share with you guys is either true or is it false, okay? So the first one, yes, ma'am.
It's dry in here. Do you mind if I open up that tank of water right there?
Oh, absolutely, please. Okay. Can you bring me one as well? Can you bring me one as well, please? All right, so sexually abused children have both emotional and physical reactions to their abuse. Do you think that that's true or false? True. Absolutely true. Anybody think this false? Okay, I don't know how you would, but it is true. So they're more likely to have physical and thank you so much. They're more likely to have physical and health problems. They report more problems in school, more likely to experience major depressive disorders in adults. Girls are more likely to develop eating disorders as adolescents. Like I talked about the obesity, it's masking something else. And they're more likely to develop alcohol and drug addictions as well. So, kids act out in school. Why do you think they act out in school?
Because they've been suppressing, what happened to them, and it's their only way of,
they want attention. They want attention. So back when I first moved here in 96, 97, I worked at a level 5 school. I was a paraprofessional, and I was a one-on-one instructor, and I was working with different kids who had oppositional defiant disorder, ADD, and ABC 1, 2, 3, right? Everything you can name of, right? Mm-hmm. So they had all these behaviors, but, I noticed the kids there, and I wasn't a clinician then, I just was really new in the field, and it was just a job to me. But I started seeing some patterns, some behaviors that was happening on a regular basis. So I would see the same kids acting out all the time at the same time of day. It would either be in the morning, the transitional times, coming in the morning and in the evening. So at that time, when these children, when during that transitional time, these children, they would want to be restrained, right? Mm-hmm. Or they had to be restrained because of their behavior. So they knew what type of behavior to exhibit in order to be restrained. So a lot of these kids, I thought to myself, I said, man, these kids are really presenting these types of behaviors, not because they want to be restrained, but they want to be connected to someone physically. Because we would restrain them, and if they assaulted another classmate, assaulted another professional, not only would they be restrained, but they would be put in an isolation room for 8 hours. So if I'm in an isolation room with you for 8 hours, what are we gonna do? We're gonna talk. You know, you're gonna get all the attention in the world because if we're in an 8x8 room, you know, we're gonna get to know each other very well. And that's what I saw that it was about. So when during those transitional times, I started telling these kids, I said, hey, look, man, I don't want you to wild out. You know, I would initiate the hugs. You know, with the young guys, you know, I give them the homie hug, you know, and give them, you know, do all of that. And, you know, little girls give them a hug as well, just so that they would not, so they could feel connected, but so that they didn't have to act out and letting them know that it's okay to ask for what you want. Like, you know, because we want to be the squeaky wheel ones to get the oil, right? We want to make the most noise so that we can get what we want, right? And that's what the children were doing, okay? So a child who is sexually abused is always, a child who is sexually abused always proceeds to abuse others. So how many people say true? Show of hands.
No.
How many people say false? 2 people? What about the other? False? Anybody say true? A child who is sexually abused always proceeds to abuse others. Okay, that is false. Okay, this is a widespread myth. So the children who actually abuse kids, who are abused, they don't abuse others. No evidence. There was no evidence found around this topic at all. But I did find that it was fascinating that, well, this is what my pseudo research is, because I work with a sexual offender, right? He had paraphilia, and paraphilia. Anyone knows what paraphilia is? Or you want to explain it to him? I'll do anything to get a sip of water.
They are someone who display a certain type of habit, and it can be like a fetish, and
You almost did.
Yeah.
You almost did. Well, they have a fetish, but then they also take it to the extreme. So,
right.
And you know, if I want you to perform something sexual to me, I'm going to do it by force. So I'm going to do it with a gun to your head.
Right.
Right. So that's what paraphilia is. I'm going to force you to do some things, and you're going to do it. Right. So I worked with this gentleman, but I was working with him because he had schizophrenia. But that was another part of his pathology was his paraphilia. And as I got to know him and his mother, right, because you don't just meet the client, you meet the whole family. I met his mom, and she had a scar from here to here, right? How do you think she got that scar? No. His mom was raped, and he was the product of that rape. So my little hypothesis is that there is a rape gene, it's in the DNA from the offender, and it was in him that he had this need to force people to do sexual acts. So, yes, ma'am.
Where did the statistic come from that said that people who have been offended don't offend sexually?
Well, this is just an assumption. They did some research on that. And it can be, some people I heard said, yeah, it can be both. Because if that's your first sexual act is someone abusing you, then it sort of normalizes some abnormal behavior. So I think that it does occur, but I think the statistics are lower than we may assume. But it does happen because, if you think about your first time having sex, the next times that you had sex, similar kind of, your partner may look the same or some similarities were there. Some normalization is there from that first encounter. But that's what my assumption is just that if you were abused by someone that it is a potential that it could happen, but I just think that the statistics are low on it.
They put up wall.
I worked on a sex offenders unit, Hickey, and every child that offended had been abused sexually. Every single solitary one. And at the time, which was 8 years ago, the statistic says something different. That children that have been abused sexually were more likely than others to be abusers.
But I think that's the key word. More likely.
But he said
they said that
they don't.
Research. it's more like what he's trying to say is not that they don't, but it's so low that it's not something that they can actually confirm. Because I understand what you said. I've done that myself with lots of kids I know, and they have grown up to do things as well, even in their childhood. But then you have some kids that go the complete opposite direction. Don't want anything to do with a sexual act in their life at all. Don't want to hurt anybody. Don't want to commit any sexual acts. Don't even want to have their own problems having.
Oh, I'm just saying that I believe that statistic to be incorrect. That's what I'm saying.
Well, this is, and I mean, we all have our opinions and we can respectfully disagree. I mean, one of the things that it says here as well is studies have shown that majority of sex offending adults have not been sexually abused as children. And there was, and I don't know if it's in here or not. I have a case study. Yeah, I do have a case study. I'm glad, but I only have one. So I'll read it to you guys at the end, and we can talk about it because I thought that it was interesting because it tells the story of a sexual offender who never has been. He never was abused. He had, mom and dad. They had, white collar jobs. He had the house with the picket fence and so forth. But he got married, and his wife had I'm giving the story away, but his wife had a young daughter, and he was sexually abusing her. And but he talks in this piece, in this case study, about that it wasn't even about the sex. It was just manipulating the time and being in control. Like, the wife saying, hey, I'm going to be late. I'm going to go to yoga practice or something after work. So he knew that he had an hour to arrange to get this child here and abuse her. And if she threatened to say anything, he would say, well, you can't go out. You can't do this. You can't do that. So that was a real control. So he got off of the control. But, everybody, every situation is different. But I thought that this was a fascinating case study. And for me, this made me look at sexual offenders in a different way because, even working with that gentleman before, because I would just say, man, these guys are like the scum of the earth, which I still sort of feel, but you can kind of see how an individual gets to that way. And people become offenders for so many different reasons. And it's not just them being abused. There's a lot of different variables that come into it when they're doing these types of studies. So I don't have the stats with that one. This is just a statement from this particular training. But stats change, right?
That's why
stats change all the time.
Yeah,
stats change all the time. So there's different things that go on with collecting this data. So you wanted to say something?
Oh yeah, what you were talking about earlier about children that act out, they want attention. Like one of my sons, it's like glue. I move, they move.
Right.
And and I started to notice that, and like like you said, turning off the lights. They won't go to sleep unless the light on.
Or the TV.
Or the TV. And it's like it's a constant thing.
Right.
You move here, he move here. All around the house.
Was he sexually abused or do you know?
No, not that I know of. Because he just came in the system.
Okay.
So he didn't go through the rigmarole or the foster care system.
Sure.
He was just placed there.
Well, you don't know. I mean, it could be anything. I mean, it's just like those types of behaviors. Those are something to talk about with this therapist. And hopefully his therapist is skilled enough to have that relationship with him to see if, that has been the situation. It could be something else, but just get into the roots of those behaviors.
I think I got to the root of what happened though. Yeah. I kind of figured it out. So, I constantly talk to him and, one part of it, another aspect of the family member.
Sure.
And some kids arguing at night, they turn their TV up, they showing it out.
Right.
So that becomes a habit for them. And they turn their TV on, they turn it up, and they just zone themselves out and get away from the abuse.
3 in the morning, every night. Stay up every night.
Don't even want to go to sleep.
Don't want to go to sleep.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, we're talking about sexual abuse, and that's one of the most heinous things that could happen to a child, right? Because you're still in their childhood away, and then with the sexual abuse, and there's also components of physical abuse, starvation. So a lot of these children, they've experienced more things than us as adults than we ever could even imagine in our worst nightmares, and they survived it, and they're here to tell a story, but they're hanging on by a thread as well. So growing up in a violent home may lead to sexual behavior. problems, even if there was no sexual abuse in the family. How many people say that that's true? How many people say that's false? I only saw one hand. How many people say that's true? How many people say that's false?
Read that again.
Yeah,
Growing up in a violent home may lead to sexual behavior problems, even if there was no sexual abuse in the family. My people who said it's true, why would you say it's true? You said it's true.
Because sexual abuse is generally not about sex. It's about power. Sex is just a tool that's used to exert power.
So you got it right there. It's a power and control thing. So, if you see dad hitting mom or mom hitting dad, right? And some moms be going off on dad, same thing. It's power and control, and that's just a vehicle, very well said. Additional risk factors include incidents of trauma, physical abuse, neglect, exposure to domestic violence. Okay, so how an individual responds to trauma depends on 3 different variables, okay? First one is the person, okay? The level of resiliency, right? So if you were sexually abused, what is your resiliency? How far how can you get back to where you were? What's your level of resiliency? We know as, African Americans that was a, common practice within slavery, that our ancestors were raped on a regular basis, but they had a tremendous amount of resiliency to let them, go through this and raise the child of the rapist, right? And still be a strong, parent, to that child. And I think the same thing is there's just a level of resiliency. If the child or an adult who is sexually abused doesn't have that resiliency, can't persevere through these things with getting the help, or don't have the proper support network on their own, they won't be able to succeed and integrate in the world. Or it may just take them longer than somebody who has more of a higher level of resiliency. The traumatic event, so what actually occurred, how traumatic was this event, that's also going to be an indicator. And the environment, do you have support from anyone, or are they blaming you, right? First thing with the ladies, if a lady or a young girl gets raped, they say, hey, she brought it on herself. Look what she was wearing. You shouldn't have did this. You shouldn't have wore that. You shouldn't have had this perfume on. And they blame the victim all the time. And that's done, too frequently. And it's been going on for years and years and years. And it's ridiculous. Blaming the victim. So family risk factors, okay? So there are some family risk factors: sexual abuse, domestic violence, physical abuse. Those are all risk factors. Exposure to sexual activities, right? Kids walk in on mom and dad having sex. They may not have a conversation with the child about that. They want to go in and do what mom and dad is doing, right? Your children want to do everything you do. My friend, she lives in Florida. School teacher. She was teaching first graders. She said during kindergarten, rather. She said during nap time, one of the boys was fingering this little girl. And I said, well, what was the little girl doing? She said, well, she was pushing back on his hand. And I said, wow. She said, well, now I have to have this conversation with both of their parents about this. Because parents feel so uncomfortable about having sex and their child seeing them. But that's the time to, you already got caught, right? Your hand was in the cookie jar. You might as well have the story, the story of this is what sex is about, right? Have the talk with them, okay?
How were they?
They were in kindergarten. 5 years old. 5 years old. 5 years old.
Do you think they would understand if they explained to the...
Well, I think it's better than not saying anything about it, because if you don't say anything, then they're going to interpret it how they want it to be, right? And then, kids that, every day my daughter comes home, she's telling me what all of these other kids did, what they said. I know whose parents is having an argument, who's sleeping on the couch. So they bring that to school, and they have their own little culture there as well. So, as a parent, you definitely want to be involved in that conversation and having, because I'd rather her hear from me than a 5-year-old peer about what sex is or what they think, sex is as well. So having some access to, sexual materials, pornography, whatever, toys and so forth, those are major risk factors. Extreme parental dominance, just being enmeshed in unhealthy families, right? There's a lot of, abnormal families rather, and a lot of inappropriate things that are just displayed. I mean, I remember I was in Target in Mondawmin, and this young lady, excuse me, she was walking through Mondawmin on her cell phone and having a personal conversation about sexual activity, right? And and it's so many different examples that I can share. I mean, I was at a party the other day, and my friend's sister-in-law talking about having sex with this guy and what he did, and her daughter, who was 5, sitting right there, looking right into her mouth, and she keeps going on and on and on. My wife interjected and said, "Look, excuse me, she's here," and then she's like, "Oh, okay," and she stopped talking about it. But I think a lot of times adults, we assume that because of the age of the child that they don't know, and they just think they're gonna make they don't have any sense. But these kids are smart, man. Mm-hmm. They are
this
very
is an old
smart.
statistic too, but they said that in America, and I don't know who the statistic comes from, that in America, children are sexually aware at the age of 3, even if it's only aware of their own sense of self sexually.
Yeah.
At the age of 3.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of studies out there, and there was one incident that happened years ago over at Hopkins, and the parents had a boy, and he was going to be they was about to circumcise him after he was born with the laser scalpel or whatever, and they zigged when they should have zagged, and it like severed his penis. They couldn't correct it, so the parents chose to have them totally sever his penis, invert it, and raise him as a girl, give him medication, hormones, and so forth. And as he got older, he was like, this isn't me, right? He was 5 years old, and he, they put a dress on him, and he took the dress off because he knew who he was, sexually. Like, he knew that he was a boy. He knew that something was different. So absolutely, yeah, they do know. They definitely know. All right, so special privileges for one child over another child, right? So these are family risk factors. When you see, different family members giving one child something when they don't give another child something, that's a little risk factor right there. That's something you want to pay attention to. Something isn't right here. Unequal roles, unequal power, especially related to gender. But again, just some learned helplessness. Perpetrators know who to prey on. They know what children that they want to prey on, what children are vulnerable, what children, that they can take advantage of. They know, they're trained in identifying children that they think are weak, that they think won't tell, right? And a lot of times it's like giving them something so they can get something. I mean, we're talking about small children, but I mean, hello, a couple years ago, what happened up in Penn State, right? You get this scholarship, I'm going to do this to you, right? And you're not going to say anything because you can lose this scholarship. This guy had that camp for these low, underprivileged kids. They would go in there and say, wow, I'm in Penn State. This is my opportunity to get out the hood. This is a great opportunity. And someone took advantage of these teenagers as well. So we're talking about little kids, but these are teenagers who got taken advantage of. And this was going on for years before people even said anything about it. So additional family risk factors include inappropriate adult roles for children, right? Having little girls cook for their father or for the male in the house, different interactions between, the male, the adult male and the adult child, or vice versa, the adult female and, the youth child. I was at a conference when I was in your seat, I was getting a training on sexual abuse. And one of the trainers was talking about, when she was a child, that her uncle used to always ask her to give him a hug, but he used to sit in the seat and he would have his legs wide open and he would just everything was wide open, and she would come in, but she did not feel comfortable with that. And, but she did it because she didn't know what not to do. She didn't know that she wasn't supposed to do it, but she felt uncomfortable with that. I was looking at MTV a couple years ago and I saw that show Made, where kids want to be a cheerleader or what, they have these aspirations. One of these little girls wanted to be a salsa dancer. So she's dancing salsa, and the teacher, and they're looking in the mirror and they're doing this, and she's telling her how to do the moves. And the teacher's like, look, you're not getting it. Come on, I need you to move those hips. And came and smacked the little girl on the backside. Now, she didn't smack her hard, but she smacked her on the backside. The little girl folded up and started crying. She says, wow, what's going on? She kept crying, walked out. She goes to the girl's house. The little girl says, I was sexually abused. And when you touched me on my behind like that, it took me back to where I was. So again, post-traumatic stress disorder right there, right? So those are all indicators. Now, the teacher didn't mean anything by it because that's something that culturally a lot of Latinos do, right? Is they, are free like that. And, but that set off a signal for that young child. So you just never know. Another family risk indicator is if the parent is jealous of the child, okay? Isolating the child from the community or different supporters, and that's just with any abuser. They want to take you away from your family, from your whole support network, and have you all to yourself because they don't want you to, be able to say anything when things are happening, when you're being abused. Extreme reaction to sex education materials. So a lot of times you're talking with teenagers and you're talking about sexual materials or having a conversation about sexual activity, and they can start smiling or they'll tell a lot of inappropriate jokes. That's a defense mechanism, right? That's a huge defense mechanism because they don't want it to become evident that they've been sexually abused. So they want to look at it, they want to take it lightly, they want to joke about it because to take it away from their own abuse. Okay? Excessive use of drugs and alcohol is definitely another indicator. Intolerance or denial of lack of feelings, and just lack of consequences for sexual behavioral problems as well. So know how your children communicate. That's something that's huge. And especially now in the day when we're talking about technology, we got to know what all of these little acronyms are on their cell phones and on the emails and on Facebook. And we got to know how to navigate and use all of those tools as well, because that's what they're using and that's how they're communicating. So if you don't know, we need to learn, right? Because I know one of my buddies, he's a father. His daughter is 19 years old. She texts him and she put in there IDK. And he was like, man, what does this mean? IDK. I said, I don't know, right? But he didn't know. He said, she's always putting IDK in here. I'm like, you got to speak their language. You got to know what they're talking about. And then when children are talking about, sex, right? What are some of the terminologies that they use?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that one. That's a new one. See, they always coming up with something new.
How many bodies you got?
Wow, that's hard. But then what?
Bodies.
What does that mean? How many people have you slept with?
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Cooching? Gucci. Wow, you guys giving me new stuff. I gotta put this into my presentation, but also I hit it, right? I beat it up. Right? So all of these violent types of things to describe what sex is. So when they use these types of terminologies, they're normalizing sexual abuse. Right? They're normalizing this stuff. So, even if this child gets abused, it's normalizing it. And some people make it like it's a rites of passage for children. So when I was working at Shock Trauma, one of my clients, he got incarcerated and he wanted me to, go to his baby's mother's house and get him a shirt for court, right? So I said, sure, I'll do that because I was in that stage of gaining his trust. He had 3 baby mothers and this was somebody that I wanted to meet because he was 24 years old and this girl was 16 years old. So I wanted to see her mother and so forth. So when I got, and he was a predator as well. He was a sexual offender, but he preyed on women who were addicts who had young daughters. Wow. So he would give them free drugs. They get high, and he get at the daughter. Right? So I go into the house to meet the young girl and meet her mom. Her mom welcomes me into the house, sits me down at the table, and she starts talking about the young lady to me. And she says, and I don't even know, this was years ago, I don't even know how this came up. But mom says, man, this girl has been sexually abused so many times, I done lost count. Right? So that was a part of do you want some tea, some sugar with your tea? And she was really normalizing this abuse of her own child. So, that's what goes on with the families, a lot of families that we are dealing with. And that's what we're dealing with here. Children who disclose sexual abuse often tell a trusted adult other than their parent. Right? So, you guys are the foster parents, so they may tell you, but they may be more likely to tell their social worker or a guidance counselor or a school teacher, but somebody that they feel that's important. So training for people who work with children is especially important. Ding, 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 ding. That's why you guys are here, so that we can look at all of those different signals and, never say, man, I think this child may have been sexually abused. Nah, they probably wasn't. And it's going to go on with your day. If you think that they were sexually abused, that's when you want to communicate with that child's therapist about those different symptoms and what you assume that you could be wrong, and that's fine if you're wrong, because you want to be able to address those issues as soon as you possibly can with that child, because in the long run it's better to be proactive than reactive, and you definitely want to help that child. Okay, we want to help those children because they are vulnerable, regardless of how big they are, because they're growing big nowadays. 6'4", 6'6", little girls looking like Tina Turner. You're only 11 years old, right? You boom, bam, boom, bow, boom, boom. I'm like, what happened, man? I'm like, man, it's the food, right? So they're growing. It's the medication. It's making them develop really, really quickly. So children may tell parts of what happened or pretend it happened to someone else to gauge that adult's reaction. They want to tell you about the friends. He's like, what? What that? Man, if somebody were to do that, I would go and kill them, because that's going to go along with what that perpetrator told him. If you tell your dad or your mother, I will kill everybody, or whatever that threat is, they want to see your reaction. So, how we respond to that is very essential. So children will often shut down or refuse to tell more if you respond emotionally or negatively. So if you're like, oh my God, I will do blah, blah, blah. And, we get really irate, and we just really think in the moment when we react in anger in the moment, that can be so scary with them, because they don't want to make you scary like that again.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to scare you, and especially when it's about things like, oh my God, my baby. Words used by children, how children refer to body parts. Right, so bits, down there, peach, flower, kitty, tutu, wee wee, no, cookie, muffin, right? All the cupcake.
Girlfriend.
These are things, right? Girlfriend, hoo hoo, woo hoo, foo foo, foo foo, right? But that doesn't make any sense, right? So we need to tell children exactly what their body parts. This is your vagina. This is your penis. This is your breast. This is your behind. Because if somebody does abuse them and then they go to the police, you don't want to say, well, what did they do? They took my cookie. Well, go get it back from them, right?
I experienced that before with my daughter. We used to always refer to her, giving her baths. She's 10 now, but she was like 4 or 5, I think, when I was in grade school. And we would always call it my girlfriend.
Right.
And she like, Mommy, my girlfriend heard, or Mommy, my girlfriend. So I was in a sexual abuse class, and we were talking about how important it is for kids at a very early age to be able to identify body parts.
Absolutely.
And what they're there for, and no one's to this or that. And after sitting in that class, and I'm like, for all these years, my daughter only knows that as my girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
After that class, I went home, I was like, listen, little lady,
Mm-hmm.
this is this. I mean, it wake you up.
Right.
And you're sitting there like, you know what I do?
Right. Well, it's nothing wrong with learning, and we all are lifetime learners. When it becomes a problem is when you think you know everything,
Yeah.
and nobody can tell you anything. That's a problem right there. But you want your children to be able to articulate themselves, not only body parts, but different instances, different things that they witness. Look at the little girl Gentile with the Trayvon Martin case.
Oh.
She couldn't really articulate this
What
kid's
she-
death
what she
or what she heard. Right. She didn't have the ability to do that. Right? Nobody spent the time with her and to teach her how to talk, to use proper subject-verb agreement.
Yes.
Right? So when we listen to kids say, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Feel me? This, that, and the third. No. What do you mean? I don't feel you.
No. I'm glad you said that, because a lot of teenagers that come in our home, I have a teenager, and she, talk like that, Arnie, this dude, or this, or you, and I'm constantly saying, you're 20. No. You're going to have to start talking like an adult.
Right.
Because you're going to be, if this is how you talk every day, you'll be on a job interview and it will come out.
Right.
It will come
Well, I
out.
don't know if you even get a job.
Yeah, I'm very hard on kids
Right.
that come, and I do not let them bring that street in my house.
Mm-hmm.
For the fact I do have a 10-year-old as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, no, when you hear, we talk, we can girlfriend and talk it all day long, but we gonna talk with some knowledge.
Right. And that's what they need. They need somebody to confront them, because everybody's talking with them like it's okay, and nobody's addressing it. When but when they leave, you say,
I
"Man,
can't
this
stand it.
child is dumb as hell."
Mm.
You know what I mean? But versus
Don't
talking
say
to the
Jesus.
child, right? Versus talking to
Children.
the child. Okay, so some common reactions to rape is they no longer, obviously the child, the human being, they no longer gonna feel safe, because their innocence is lost. Okay, something you can't get back. Loss of control over life as it was before. So loss of self-worth, feeling damaged, like you're less than. Isolation, loneliness, distrust, and guilt. You feel guilty. You blame yourself. Stages of adjustment. Different things such as shock, feelings of being numb, denial, like this never have happened. It's like a dream, right? You feel just totally numb to everything. Anger, what did I do? Why me? Bargaining, pretend it didn't happen. Depression, sometimes they feel so dirty and so worthless from the act. Acceptance, life, they get to that acceptance phase when they say, well, life can go on, this did happen and life can go on. And assimilation, just to say, hey, this is a part of my life. It did happen. Now I'm going to be an advocate for it. I'm going to be a voice. I'm going to instill some changes within the community or within whatever, and just allow themselves to articulate their victimization and just take that ownership of it versus, it taking ownership of them and totally having control over their life. So a couple of behaviors right here we're going to discuss real quick. Red light, green light, and yellow light behavior. Green light behavior is age-appropriate sexual behavior, right? Green light behavior, exploration with children of similar age and size, usually not your siblings, right? Voluntarily spontaneous sexual behavior balances with curiosity about the rest of the world. So this is normal, right? It's normal types of behavior. Yellow light behavior, preoccupation with sexual themes. They're always thinking about sexual themes. Attempt to expose others' genitals to each other. Doing that on a regular basis, like that's a part of the play. That's a little yellow light right there. Sexually explicit conversation, graffiti, innuendos, so forth. Preoccupation with, sexting, right? Preoccupation with masturbation, mutual or group masturbation as well. And then you have the red light behaviors. This is like, red light behavior. Sexually explicit conversations with others of significant age difference, touching genitals of other people, degradation, humiliation of self or others with sexual themes, forced exposure or other hazing, inducing fears and threats of force, right? So they're threatening people with that. Now they have gay gangs in school, right? They like jump somebody and somebody rapes them to get into this gang, and then they have little rubber bands and different color socks that this is big in PG County, and that's how they identify themselves as being a part of that gang and making people join that gang. So some physical signs that you guys could also look out for is just compulsive masturbation, female masturbation that includes vaginal penetration, simulated intercourse with dolls, peers, animals, or other younger children. Right? It's always simulated